Hello everybody and welcome to the Winecast. With this cast, it's back to an individual grape variety, and this cast variety is one that's actually planted pretty widely in terms of overall world vineyard acreage, but that isn't well known in the major wine-producing regions of the world. So here's some information on the widely planted grape with the hard-to-say name that I hope I'm pronouncing right, Rkatsiteli. For starters, our grape represents a very old variety of Vitis vinifera with evidence in the form of archaeologically recovered seeds indicating that the grape was being cultivated and vinified as far back as 3000 BC in what is today Georgia. That may well be this variety's place of origin. The name Rkatsiteli means red horn, and that's probably a reference to the reddish color that its stems take on as they dry and become lignified. Speaking of its name, the Georgian language that it comes from is famous for its often difficult to pronounce clusters of consonants like the R and the K at the beginning of this name that can sometimes, fun fact, be as long as 5 or 6 consonants. This grape's name is hard enough to say, at least to non-Georgian speakers, that it's generated its own modest bit of online controversy, with one well-known master of wine doing a couple of videos on YouTube claiming that the R should be treated as a silent letter and that you should say something like Rkatsiteli, which would definitely be easier to say. The MW in question, though, has gotten some pushback from folks who appear to be native or at least heritage speakers of Georgian, saying that there's definitely an R sound in there. Who's right? Well, I'm not qualified to weigh in definitively, but after a little research as well as listening closely to videos of native speakers saying the word, it does sound like there's an R at the beginning, though it's very lightly pronounced as well as slightly rolled. So something like Rkatsiteli. And that's the pronunciation I'll be using, but I'll link to the relevant videos in the description and you can make up your own mind. However you decide to pronounce it, Rkatsiteli is a cold-resistant and generally hardy grape that made it ideal for planting throughout the former Soviet Union, and by 1990, plantings were extensive enough to qualify the grape as the third most planted variety and second most planted white variety in the world. This status wouldn't last, though, and thanks to a vine-pulling scheme promulgated by the Gorbachev administration, Soviet plantings dropped considerably by the year 2000, leaving our grape at the number 14 spot, and further still by 2010 with the grape coming in at 16th most planted. Despite these drops in land under vine, Rkatsiteli is still widely planted in a number of former Soviet satellites, including its likely place of origin, Georgia, as well as Kazakhstan, the Ukraine, Armenia, and Moldova. It's also become a part of the budding Chinese wine industry where it's known as Baiyu, and it's found a home on the eastern seaboard of the United States in a number of states where its cold resistance and general ruggedness lend themselves to success as a cultivar, most notably in New York, Virginia, North Carolina, and New Jersey. There are currently very few plantings in California, but it was once under vine sufficiently there to be released as a commercial varietal bottling by at least one winery, Concannon Vineyard, as this example from 1973 shows. In terms of its character, Rkatsiteli produces wines that are high in acid, aromatic, and generally full-bodied. They're often compared to Rieslings and Gewürztraminers in terms of their acid and aromatic character respectively, but Rkatsiteli really has a character all its own. The signature aromas tend to be of fruit with lightly colored flesh like white peach and golden plum, as well as notes of tangerine and white flowers. As these wines age, which they often can thanks to their high acid, notes of beeswax and walnut, among others, may show as well. As with Riesling and Gewürztraminer, as well as other varieties like Chenin Blanc, Rkatsiteli's ability to produce lots of acid and lots of sugar gives it lots of versatility in terms of vinification, and it can be and is made into wines across the sweet-dry spectrum. A very old style that it's made in, and that may go back to the very beginnings of viticulture, is called amber wine and is very closely related to the style that goes by the name orange wine in most other contexts. Amber wine, like orange wine, gets its name from the practice of allowing extended skin contact with the juice from pressed white grapes that gives a deep golden, amber, or orange tone to the finished wine. In the case of amber wine, the traditional practice is to ferment the pressed grape must with the skins, pulp, seeds, and the most lignified stems in a clay vessel called a qveveri. The qveveris are oval-shaped and are buried in the ground with only their openings exposed. In cooler areas, they're buried outside, while in warmer areas, they may be buried in a cellar. The oval shape of the vessel helps promote circulation during fermentation, while the grape seeds in the mix settle at the bottom of the vessel and thus minimize their contribution of bitter phenolics to the wine. The result is a powerful, very aromatic white wine with a unique flavor profile thanks to the extended skin contact, and that can be made in a natural style without added sulfur thanks to the tannins from the seeds, skins, and stems acting as both a preservative and an antioxidant. The style isn't unique to Rkatsiteli, but our grape's high acid character helps make it successful since acid can also work as a preservative and an antioxidant. I always like to end this type of cast with some suggestion about what to try, and in this case it's pretty easy. Georgia is the benchmark for all styles of this grape, both in terms of number of expressions and of quality. Definitely try an amber wine that, like orange wine, can be a style that takes some getting used to, but well repays the effort. Ideally, you might consider trying more conventionally vinified expressions, both dry and sweet, of this grape before you try the more challenging amber style. But because Georgian wines are just beginning to make a splash in the international market, you may have to try what you can get your hands on first. After spending some time with the Georgian expressions, or again, if all you can find are these first, check out the American expressions from the Eastern Seaboard. These will be tough to find unless you happen to have the good fortune to live in a state with plantings, and even then, most of the bottlings by wineries that produce it are small affairs and sometimes only available directly from the winery. Dr. Constantine Frank Wine Cellars in New York is probably the biggest and most noteworthy producer, but you should also be on the lookout for well-regarded bottlings from Tomasello Winery in New Jersey and Horton Vineyards in Virginia. What about bottlings from other former Soviet republics? If you can find them, absolutely try them. At the very least, you'll be able to say you tried a very hard-to-come-by wine. Thanks for joining me for another Winecast. I'm looking to return to casting on Italian wine in a more consistent way, but I'm still very open to other recommendations and suggestions, so please keep them coming. If this video was helpful and enjoyable to you, please like and subscribe if you haven't already, and I really do love it when you leave comments and questions, so please do that too. I'm your host, the Unknown Winecaster, and I'm out. Enjoy the grape, but always enjoy it responsibly.